The biting pre-dawn wind whipped through the hills of Santo Antonio do Paraíso, a village nestled in Minas Gerais, Brazil, where mud-brick homes and colonial mansions huddled under a sky that promised rain. In the twilight before sunrise, a man in an immaculate suit, but with a soul in tatters, knelt on the damp steps of the old Mother Church. Dr. Almeida, a dark-skinned millionaire with eyes now dull from pain, wept with the desolation of one who had lost everything, though his financial empire remained intact. His fortune, his connections, nothing could restore the lightness to his son, Leo's, steps, confined to a wheelchair since the tragic accident Almeida himself had caused months earlier. Guilt was a heavy shroud, a slow poison consuming him from within, isolating him in his grand yet empty mansion on the outskirts of town. He sought forgiveness, a spark of hope, but found only the echo of his own despair in the cold church walls. Watching from a dark corner, under the eaves of a sleeping general store, was Joaquim, a former soldier, now homeless, his skin weathered by the sun and a hard life, but with a gaze that betrayed an ancient wisdom, a compassion few could maintain. He knew pain. He knew loneliness. He carried a small, smooth, dark stone, polished by years of constant touch, an amulet reminding him of nature's resilience, the ability to adapt and survive no matter the storm. He had seen Almeida many times before, a man who had everything, but in truth, nothing. That stifled, profound cry was the saddest melody he had ever heard, and Joaquim, who had lost so much in life he no longer remembered what it was to have a home, felt a familiar pang in his chest. He knew there was something more than money could buy, something that even the most advanced science of a private hospital in Sao Paulo, where Leo had been interned, hadn't been able to restore. With a hesitant step, Joaquim emerged from the shadow of the eaves, his worn, hunched silhouette contrasting with the rigid posture of the suited man on the steps. Dr. Almeida, still kneeling, hands covering his face, didn't notice the approach. His muffled sobs were the only melody in the cold dawn of Santo Antonio do Paraíso. Joaquim stopped a few feet away, his piercing gaze fixed on the millionaire. There was no judgment, only a deep and silent understanding of human suffering. The former soldier cleared his throat discreetly, a low sound that made Dr. Almeida lift his head, his eyes red and swollen, surprise and a momentary flash of anger replacing the sadness. He hadn't expected to be seen, much less by someone like Joaquim, whom society seemed to have forgotten. The millionaire, accustomed to commanding respect and distance, felt exposed. He could barely speak, but the question in his eyes was clear. What did this man want? Joaquim, undaunted, took another step forward. His voice was hoarse, but carried a strange authority, a tone only extreme experience could forge. "I can save your son," he said, the words hanging in the chilly air, an almost unreal echo against the grandeur of the church and the smallness of that encounter. Almeida blinked, incredulous. The phrase, so direct and impossible, seemed like a delusion born of exhaustion. He who had exhausted all resources of modern medicine, all specialists, all the most expensive and innovative therapies, now heard that promise from a man who barely had a place to sleep. A bitter smile, almost a sneer, touched his chapped lips. "Save my son," he repeated, his voice choked with disbelief and pain. "You don't know what you're saying. My son, my Leo, is in a wheelchair. The doctors said there's nothing more to be done." Joaquim didn't avert his gaze. He knew those words sounded like madness to a man accustomed to logic and science, but the truth he carried was different, a truth that transcends what can be seen and touched. He extended his hand, opening his palm, and there, resting on his calloused skin, was a small, smooth, dark stone, almost black, polished over years, as if time and the hands of many people had come together to give it that discreet shine. It was a piece of obsidian, but for Joaquim it was much more than a mineral. "This stone," he began, his voice now softer but still firm, "it's a gift from a lifetime dedicated to helping, to caring. It carries the energy of all that is good, of all that is possible when we truly connect with a higher purpose." Almeida looked at the object in the homeless man's hand with disdain. A stone. He, who possessed priceless jewels, artworks worth fortunes, was confronted with a simple rock. Indignation began to simmer beneath the layer of despair. "Are you mocking me?" he asked, slowly rising, his natural imposing presence gradually returning. "I don't need superstitions. I need a medical miracle. And you're just a beggar trying to take advantage of my misfortune." The accusation hung in the air, a painful blow that Joachim absorbed without flinching. He had faced much worse. "I'm not asking for anything, doctor," he replied, his voice devoid of resentment. "I'm offering. I saw what happened to your son. I saw your despair, and I know that science sometimes doesn't see everything. This stone isn't magic, no. It's a reminder, a catalyst. It was given to me by an elder from my land, a healer who said that true strength isn't in what you have, but in what you share." The mention of the accident brought a new wave of guilt to Almeida. It was his responsibility, his mistake. The luxury car, the excessive speed on a winding road near the family farm. Leo, his only son, in the passenger seat. The image of the overturned vehicle, the distant siren, the deafening silence that followed was a constant torment. And now a stranger, a homeless man, spoke of saving his son with a stone. It was absurd, but there was something in Joachim's gaze, a serenity that contrasted with the anguish Almeida himself felt. Dawn was beginning to break, painting the sky in shades of grey and rose. The town slowly began to awaken, and soon the first residents would pass by, witnessing the unusual scene. Almeida felt a growing embarrassment. He didn't want to be seen in such a state, much less in such company. But Joachim's phrase, "I can save your son," echoed in his mind, a dissonant but stubborn note amidst the chorus of his own hopelessness. Have you ever felt this way, at a dead end, with the weight of the world on your shoulders, seeking an answer where you least expect it? If this story has already hooked you, if you feel you have something important to learn, tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. It's always good to know who is with us on this journey of discovery and emotions. Almeida fixed his gaze on the stone. It wasn't beautiful nor valuable. It was just a dark rock. But the way Joachim held it, with reverence, almost like a talisman, sparked a pang of curiosity. What kind of life had that man led to attribute so much meaning to something so simple? He had been a soldier, Joachim had said. Had he seen things, lived experiences that made him different? The millionaire, always skeptical, felt drawn into a conversation his rational mind rejected. The truth was he was exhausted with logical answers that brought no solution. He had tried everything. What if, just if, there was a chance, however remote and improbable? The emotional cost of not trying was even greater. He remembered the last consultation with the neurosurgeon, one of the country's biggest names. The doctor had been clear, direct, almost cold. "Dr. Almeida, we have done everything humanly possible. Leo's spinal cord injury is severe. Full mobility recovery is virtually impossible." The word still resonated in his ears, a final verdict. But Joachim wasn't talking about virtually impossible. He was talking about saving. Dr. Almeida, accustomed to negotiating with the most powerful, felt he was on unknown ground. He looked at Joachim, at the stone, at the church, at the sky opening up. What kind of game was this? He knew he had nothing to lose, except perhaps his dignity, which was already in tatters. The stone, simple and mysterious, was now the center of his attention. He didn't believe in miracles, but he believed in despair. And despair, at times, makes us see what reason insists on hiding. The poor man, the desolate millionaire, the dark stone, and the promise of a miracle. That was the beginning of a story that would challenge everything they knew about faith, hope, and the invisible power that moves the world. Would Almeida, with all his wealth and power, be able to accept help from someone who had nothing but unwavering belief and a time-worn stone? Almeida, still in shock, felt the cold morning breeze bring not only the smell of dew, but also Joachim's strange proposal. He recomposed himself, his businessman's posture returning, though fragile. "You don't understand," he said, his voice more controlled but still hoarse with emotion. "My son has the best doctors, the best clinics. We've spent a fortune, but there's no hope. No stone can reverse a spinal cord injury." He pulled out his thick leather wallet, full of high-denomination bills. "I appreciate your concern, truly. Take this. Buy something to eat, to warm yourself. but don't give me false hopes." Joachim, with the dark stone still in his palm, didn't move a muscle. His eyes, which had witnessed the cruelty and kindness of the world, fixed on Almeida's. "It's not charity I seek, Doctor. It's something deeper. I'm not promising magic. I'm talking about a path that medicine perhaps hasn't explored, a path that requires more than money. It requires faith, it requires surrender, it requires you to look at your own pain and your son's pain in a different way." He paused, and the stillness of the dawn seemed to amplify his words. "And if you'll allow me, Doctor, you carry something in your left jacket pocket that weighs more than all your money. A crumpled piece of paper, isn't it? A constant reminder of what was lost." Almeida shivered. How did that man know? He instinctively reached for his inner jacket pocket. There indeed was a small envelope with a medical report, the most recent, stamped by the São Paulo hospital with the diagnosis that haunted him. He took it out and reread it every night, as if searching for a line, a word that had escaped his attention. It was a secret habit, a ritual of self-flagellation. Dr. Almeida pulled out the crumpled paper, his hands trembling slightly. It was a summary of the latest prognosis with the phrase, "No prospects of full mobility recovery," underlined by his own pen. He kept it as a punishment, irrefutable proof of his failure. Joachim observed the scene with the same serenity. "You don't need to show me, Doctor. I see the pain in your eyes, the same pain that is written on that paper. But pain by itself is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new understanding. This stone, it doesn't cure, it connects. It connects your purest intention with the energy that already exists in Leo, dormant, waiting to be reactivated. It's not about what the stone does, it's about what it represents and what it awakens." Almeida looked at the report in his hand, then at Joachim's stone. This homeless man who slept under the stars seemed to see into his soul with disturbing clarity. The idea that healing was not a medical formula, but a connection, sounded so absurd to his pragmatic mind. But at the same time, a spark of hope, almost a delusion, ignited. He had tried everything money could buy, everything Western science offered. What if there was something more? What if true healing lay in a place his eyes, accustomed to the gleam of luxury and the coldness of numbers, had never reached? It was a question that tormented him, but also pulled him into an abyss of uncertainty. "Connection," Almeida repeated, his voice almost a whisper, his earlier imposing demeanor melting into vulnerability. "What do you mean by that? How can a stone, how can an intention make my son walk again?" His eyes, once full of anger and disdain, now pleaded for a glimpse of meaning. He was drowning in his own guilt, and Joachim seemed to be the only anchor available, however improbable. Joachim, with the calm of one who has weathered many storms, put the stone back into the pocket of his worn shirt. "It's not the stone that does it, it's your will, it's Leo's will. It's the energy that moves life. The stone just helps us focus, to remember that we are part of something greater. You need to reconnect. With your son, with life, with the purpose that moved you before all this wealth and this pain." He made a vague gesture towards the church, then towards the sun beginning to rise. "What you lost, Doctor, wasn't just your son's mobility. It was your own soul, your ability to see the beauty in simple things. And Leo feels that. He feels your pain, your guilt, and that holds him to the chair more than any physical injury." Those words struck Almeida like lightning. It was true. He had isolated himself, drowned in his own grief and guilt. He had become a ghost in his own house. How could he expect Leo to heal if he himself was broken? The idea that his own emotional condition was, in some way, impacting his son's recovery was a terrifying thought, but also liberating. It was a new perspective, a new battle to be fought. "What do I need to do?" Almeida asked, his voice lower, the millionaire's armor finally falling away. He was ready to listen, ready to try whatever it was, however strange it seemed. Despair had opened a path to faith, or at least to curiosity. Joachim smiled, a rare and gentle smile that lit up his weathered face. "First, you need to understand that this journey isn't about money, Doctor. It's about time. It's about presence. It's about a true exchange. You need to spend time with your son, not as the guilty father he sees now, but as the father he needs." and you need to open yourself to the possibility that healing comes from many places. He took from the same pocket where he had kept the stone a piece of old cloth carefully folded. Unfolding it, he revealed a small, worn and oxidized St. George medal attached to a leather cord. This medal. It was my father's. A simple man, but with unshakable faith. He said that St. George protects warriors, not only those who fight in battles, but those who fight for life, for hope. And you, Dr. Almeida, need to be a warrior now, for your son. Almeida took the medal, feeling the weight of the cold metal and the texture of the leather. It was such a simple object, so distant from the gold and precious stones he collected. But there, in the palm of his hand, it seemed to carry a different energy, a history of struggles and triumphs. "And what do I do with this?" he asked, gazing at the image of the warrior saint. "You will give it to Leo," Joachim replied, his eyes fixed on Almeida's. "But it's not just about handing it over. It's about telling its story. It's about explaining what it represents. It's about showing him that the strength to fight doesn't come from outside, but from within, and that he is not alone in this battle. You have to be the bridge, Doctor, the connection." The idea of telling stories, of opening up emotionally, was a challenge for Almeida. A man accustomed to dealing with numbers and contracts, he had always been reserved, practical. But the mention of Leo and the urgency in Joachim's voice propelled him. He had to try. This was the first step on a journey he never imagined he would take. But there was something that still bothered him. A loose end. "And you, Joachim?" Almeida asked, looking at the homeless man. "What do you gain from this? Why are you helping me?" Distrust, a deeply rooted trait in his personality, still persisted, even in the face of Joachim's genuineness. The former soldier shrugged, a gesture of humility. "I gain what every human being seeks, Doctor. Peace. And the chance to make a difference. I've lost a lot in life, but I've learned that the greatest wealth isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away. And to see a father and son reconnect, that's priceless." He paused, his gaze fixed on a distant point as if reliving old memories. "I had a comrade in the army, Doctor, a brother in arms. He was gravely injured on a mission, became paraplegic. The doctors told him the same thing they told your son. He gave up. He quit. I regret not having done more for him, not having found a way to rekindle the flame of hope. Perhaps by helping Leo, I can, in some way, honor his memory." Almeida felt a lump in his throat. This man, with his life of privation, carried invisible scars as deep as his own. The story of Joachim's comrade was not just an anecdote, it was a mirror, a warning. He could not allow Leo to give up like Joachim's friend. This was Almeida's point of no return. He could no longer turn back. His son's dignity, the possibility of his recovery, depended on his own transformation. "So, I start with the medal and the story," Almeida said, clutching the small object in his hand. "It was a beginning, an uncertain beginning, yes, but it was a beginning." And then, what would come after this first step, this attempt at connection with his son? Almeida's mind, accustomed to plans and strategies, needed a map. But Joachim offered only an internal compass. Morning had already settled, and the first golden rays of sun bathed the church facade. The village of Santo Antonio do Paraíso began to stir, with the smell of fresh coffee and cheese bread wafting from the bakeries. Almeida, the once desolate millionaire, now carried an oxidized medal and a new, though fragile, mission. He looked at Joachim, who was preparing to leave, his silhouette fading into the morning light. "Joachim, wait," he called. "Where do I find you? How do I thank you?" Joachim turned, an enigmatic smile on his face. "You will find me where the need calls, Doctor. And the best way to thank me is by seeing your son walk again. But remember, true strength comes from faith, from connection, and from your own surrender. The stone and the medal are just reminders. The cure, Doctor, is within you." And with those words, he dissolved into the landscape, leaving Almeida alone with the medal, the crumpled medical report, and the promise of a miracle that seemed less and less absurd. Almeida returned to the grand mansion, but now, more than ever, it seemed like a cold, empty labyrinth. The St. George medal weighed in his hand, an almost comical contrast to the crumpled medical report in his pocket. He had gone in search of a scientific miracle and returned with a homeless man's promise and a piece of oxidized metal. The sun was already high, and the town of Santo Antonio de Paraíso pulsed with routine, oblivious to the turmoil brewing in the millionaire's chest. He found Leo in his room, sitting in his wheelchair near the window, his eyes fixed on the distant landscape. Leo, who was once pure energy and joy, was now a constant silence, a shadow of the boy Almeida knew. Guilt tightened again, a painful knot in his throat. How to begin? How to speak of faith, of connection, of a mysterious stone and a warrior saint, when the distance between them seemed greater than the miles separating Minas Gerais from São Paulo? Almeida approached, the medal hidden in his fist. "Son, I was at the church," he began, his voice uncertain, without the commanding tone he used in business. Leo didn't even turn. He kept looking at the horizon, his hair falling over his forehead, his posture hunched. The air in the room was heavy, laden with resentment and unspoken things. Almeida felt a chill, a premonition that the task would be much more difficult than he imagined. He had thought that with the medal and Joaquim's story, a door would open. But Leo's door seemed locked from within, with invisible chains. He took a deep breath and tried again. "I met someone there, Leo. Someone who told me about strength. About the strength we have within ourselves." Finally, Leo moved, a slow and disinterested movement. His eyes, once so bright, now reflected a deep weariness. "Strength, Dad," he said, his voice drawn out. "What kind of strength is this that doesn't even let me walk? That traps me here?" There was bitterness, a palpable resentment in those words. Almeida felt the blow, the pain of the truth. He wasn't seeing a son who needed healing, but a son who blamed him, and rightly so. Almeida extended his hand, showing the medal. "This medal, Leo, it belonged to a father who fought hard. And his son did too. It's a story of overcoming, of not giving up." He tried to sound convincing, but his voice faltered. Leo looked at the medal with an almost cruel disinterest. "It's just an old piece of metal, Dad. It won't change anything." His son's rejection was a cold shower. Almeida felt small, inadequate. He thought of Joaquim, of the former soldier's serenity, and realized that the words he had received were not a magic script, but an invitation to a much deeper journey. And he was unprepared. That first step, which seemed so simple, revealed itself to be an abyss. Days passed. Almeida tried in various ways. He told the story of the medal again, tried to talk about the connection Joaquim mentioned, even tried meditating, something unthinkable for the pragmatic businessman. But Leo remained distant, wrapped in his own world of silence and pain. The millionaire began to doubt. Had he been naive? Had Joaquim taken advantage of his fragility? He was trying the wrong remedy for the wrong symptom. One afternoon, while trying to organize his son's books on the shelf, Almeida found an old sketchpad of Leo's. It was a hardcover notebook with worn edges and some superhero stickers. He opened it carefully, and the pages revealed a Leo he barely recognized. Drawings of soccer fields, of Leo running, jumping, celebrating goals. Then, on the following pages, the drawings changed. Scenes of hospitals, wheelchairs, sad faces. And on some of the last pages, there was a drawing of himself, Almeida, with a guilty expression, and Leo in the chair, head down. One drawing in particular caught his attention. Leo in his chair, looking at a high, insurmountable wall, with the word hope written on the other side but unreachable. That notebook was a mirror of Leo's soul, a silent proof of the depth of his suffering and the barrier that had arisen between father and son. Almeida felt a pang in his chest. He was not just dealing with a physical injury, but with a broken heart, with stolen hope. What Joaquim had said about Almeida's pain, holding Leo to the chair, now took on a new and terrible meaning. The missing piece was not a formula, but an emotional bridge. He took the notebook to the living room, sitting alone, flipping through the pages again and again. Every stroke was a stab in his soul. Leo didn't just need physical healing. He needed forgiveness, understanding, a father who truly saw him, not just as a project to be fixed. The medal, the stone, Joaquim's words. All of that was secondary to that brutal reality. Almeida felt completely lost. Wealth, power, logic, none of it worked here. He was facing the greatest challenge of his life, and he didn't have the tools to face it. What would he do now, with the irrefutable proof of his son's pain in his hands, and the certainty that connection was much more complex and painful than he had imagined? That notebook, with its childish drawings and its burden of adult pain, was the new object of proof. It showed not only what Leo had lost physically, but what he had lost in his soul, and more importantly, the gap that existed between him and his father. Almeida needed to find a way to cross that invisible wall before hope became just a distant word, written on the other side of an insurmountable barrier. The real battle was just beginning, and it would not be fought with money or science, but with the heart. What would he do with this new and painful truth? Almeida, with Leo's notebook in his hands, felt the weight of that invisible wall crushing him. He had failed. The medal, the story, everything seemed useless in the face of that silent pain. Suddenly, the memory of Joaquim's words, "True strength isn't in what you have, but in what you share," echoed in his mind, stronger than ever. And the promise, "I can save your son," now sounded like the only way out. Could it be possible? There was one last hope, one he had discarded out of skepticism. He needed to find Joaquim again. Almeida left the mansion, determined, with the sun already setting, in search of that man who promised the impossible. The town of Santo Antonio, with its alleys and narrow streets, would be his new labyrinth. But now he wasn't looking for money, but for a faith he had lost. Almeida, his heart heavy with the new truth revealed in Leo's notebook, plunged into the streets of Santo Antonio do Paraíso, now illuminated by the flickering streetlights. He searched for Joaquim on every corner, in every dark alley. With an urgency he had never felt in his business dealings, there was no more time for skepticism, for doubts. The image of the insurmountable wall in his son's drawing haunted him, and the ex-soldier's promise was the only visible bridge. He found him near the municipal market, warming himself by a small, improvised fire, sharing a piece of bread with other homeless people. The scene, so simple and human, contrasted with the grandeur of his own life and made him feel even smaller. Almeida approached, shame and humility vying for space in his chest. "Joaquim," he called, his voice hoarse. The ex-soldier looked up, unsurprised, as if he had been expecting him. Almeida sat on the cold sidewalk, Leo's notebook spread open. I failed," he confessed, his voice choked. "I tried the medal, I tried the words, but Leo doesn't listen to me. He blames me, and I see why." He opened the notebook to the pages with the saddest drawings, showing the wall and the unattainable word, hope. "He's trapped in pain, and I don't know how to free him." Joaquim took the notebook carefully, flipping through the pages with a sensitivity Almeida hadn't expected. His eyes scanned the childish strokes, the anger, the sadness, the despair. "Pain is a river, Doctor," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If we don't find the source, it floods everything. And the source of Leo's pain isn't just his leg, it's his heart. It's your heart." He returned the notebook. "You need to speak the truth, your guilt. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to show that you are also human, that you also feel, that you are also broken." Almeida felt a chill. Exposing his vulnerability? He, who had always maintained a facade of unshakable strength? It was the hardest thing he had ever been asked to do. But seeing the drawing of the wall, he realized he had no choice. He needed to tear down that wall within himself, to tear down the wall separating father and son. "What about the stone, the medal?" he asked. "They are reminders," Joaquim replied, taking the polished obsidian from his pocket. "The stone isn't magical by itself. It's a focus, an anchor for your purest intention. The medal is for Leo, to remind him that he is a warrior. But the most powerful tool, Doctor, is your surrender. It's your truth. It's your willingness to strip yourself of everything that money and power have built and just be a father." He extended the stone to Almeida. "Take this stone. When you talk to Leo, hold it. Feel the energy it represents, the energy of those who have dedicated their lives to helping. Let it remind you of what is essential." Almeida took the stone, feeling the strange warmth in his palm. It was a different weight from the weight of his jewels, a weight of responsibility, and a faith he was only beginning to understand. He knew that what he would do next would change everything, for him and for Leo. There was no going back. If this story touches something you've experienced, if you've ever felt lost, not knowing where to turn, subscribe now and comment on what you would do in Dr. Almeida's place. It's essential that we share these experiences. Your support moves these stories, helping us bring these messages of overcoming to more people. Almeida returned to the mansion. The air no longer seemed so heavy, but the tension was palpable. He found Leo back in his room, the same hunched posture, the same distant gaze. This time, Almeida didn't bring the medal first. He brought the notebook. He knelt beside his son's wheelchair, the dark stone clasped in his hand. "Leo," he began, his voice trembling, laden with raw emotion. I saw your drawings." He opened the notebook to the page with the wall. "I saw the wall you drew, and I know I built it." Leo turned his head, his eyes wide, surprised by his father's confession. It was the first time Almeida had spoken with such vulnerability. "I'm so sorry, my son. So sorry for everything. For the accident, for the pain you feel, for the father I became. I hid in my guilt and left you alone with yours. I didn't know how to be the father you needed. I didn't truly see you." The words poured out, sincere, painful. He spoke of his own pain, of the impotence of wealth, of the emptiness he felt. Leo, who had been so closed off, began to cry. It wasn't a cry of anger, but of relief, of a pain that finally found an echo. The invisible wall that separated them began to crack. Almeida then took the St. George medal from his pocket and placed it in Leo's hand, explaining the story of Joachim's comrade, of the fight for life, of the hope that ignites when a greater purpose is found. "You are a warrior, my son, and I will fight with you, not for